JAG University, episode 12. We're talking about COIs, Certificate of Insurances. Kevin, in your opinion, is a certificate of insurance truly proof of insurance? 50-50.
It's proof that some sort of insurance policy exists, but it is not proof necessarily that it's covering anything.
That's a good point. Now, and tell me why.
Okay, so what do you have on a certificate? You have the name of the insurance company, a policy number, the dates that it is in effect, the effective date, expiration date, and you have the limits.
So it's really just truly proof that insurance exists.
Yes, in some capacity.
Date, effective dates, it's active, an insurance company, but what's it lacking? What's it missing?
Okay, so to see what it's missing, it's, why are you asking for proof of insurance? Is it for, let's say I own a building and I have to bring in a contractor and I need to make sure that his work is covered in the event something happens, or that he has coverage if somebody gets hurt or something gets damaged.
Now, and that happens because, so you have insurance as a company, right?
Yeah.
Someone's asking for it. The certificate of insurance exists, right? Because no one's going to dig through a 125-page policy, right? The intent of it is to kind of give you a snapshot of, this is what it is. I need insurance. I need to maybe indemnify someone. That's another.
Yeah.
It's another thing that's always wrong too. But it's kind of to make or to attempt to make this process easier. But in doing so, the information doesn't accurately tell you if you are covered.
I think the biggest drawback is that certificates don't list exclusions. So you have no idea what's excluded on a policy. And I think that's huge. A big thing we see is construction. I mean, construction policies, any contractor's policy, a lot of the time they're going to exclude certain types of work in the forms list or in the policy. You'll see it. You have exclusion for roofing over a certain height, exclusion for residential construction of new residential associations, exclusions, maybe subcontracted work is excluded.
The exclusions is, you're right, the biggest issue that creates hazards for everybody involved.
Exactly.
And then everyone assumes it's someone else's responsibility.
Yeah.
And besides, I'm not going to say that sometimes things are done maliciously as far as issuing a certificate with a malintent, but there is human error involved as well.
Yeah.
I mean, who issues somebody somewhere? There's a few companies who do it automatically, have their forms kind of set up, but for 90% of the time, there's a person somewhere, whether in your office or you outsource it somewhere else, that's actually issuing a certificate of insurance. And there could be a human error involved in that.
Yeah.
I mean, who issues certificate of insurance? It's usually, a tech type system who's learning about the business as well.
Yeah.
In most situations, right? You're not having a 25 seasoned insurance veteran breaking down a certificate of insurance. And I think that creates another level of potential issues as well.
Correct. Yeah, it's not something safe to rely on to ensure that somebody's covered or a certain operation is covered. It's telling you that a policy exists and is active, but I wouldn't take any more stock in it than that.
So what would be the next step as a business owner if you get a certificate of insurance, right? You're subbing out work for a client. And how do you make sure that you're accurately covered by just looking at a certificate of insurance?
You need a copy of the policy. It's really the only way. And if the policy's not available, some sort of binder, something that's listing the forms. Because the forms is how you tell what's excluded. And if you're someone that's subbing out work for a job, you need to know whether or not the work that you're subbing out is covered on that policy or not. If you're hiring a roofing subcontractor and he has a roofing exclusion on his policy, it doesn't matter if it's active or not. It's no good.
You know what happens? And there's this little taboo about asking those questions as well. You see it. Yeah. And it's not even from the insured. Usually it's from the other insurance agent.
Yeah.
So that's what happens too. The certificates of insurance aren't coming from our mutual client, right? It's they're hiring somebody else and they're requested or required to take a certificate of insurance. There's this whole I don't want other people to see my work, right? What are they paying? But this needs to be a little more transparent conversation for everybody involved. And people don't push enough on those specific questions. Show me the exclusions, right? Construction would be the biggest issue where, again, insurance companies are writing things to do what? To put things in their favor.
Yeah.
Right? And we see it all the time.
Yeah. And very similar to other types of policies, a lot of construction policies just kind of get a bunch of exclusions thrown in there, and you have to kind of deduce what they mean looking through them. And I think another big issue is premise-only policies. I mean, you have some sort of business, whether it be, an architect, someone that's had at least out an office. and a scenario like this happens all the time. You're a new business, you're starting out, and you're getting your first office.
Oh, my landlord requirement.
I have this lease and I need to match the terms, right? I need to get a COI for my landlord.
Right.
And they get a cheap little general liability policy that doesn't cover anything but a slip and fall at their office for $500 a year, $650 a year. They get a COI, they show it to the landlord, and they're good.
But it's excluding the operations.
Excluding everything, but it looks like a general liability policy is enforced and is great. So now, I mean, what's to stop any of their clients from believing they have coverage for their actual operations on different locations and thorough insurance going off that certificate? It would be exactly the same as if they actually bought a comprehensive liability policy that's covering their operations off-site, that's giving products complete operations, that has other, that's comprehensive. It'll look exactly the same on a certificate. So it really doesn't tell you what's being covered. It just tells you an insurance policy exists. It's just not enough to let you know that whoever you're hiring has insurance for the job they're performing for you.
No, I mean, one thing we do as well, and we'll plug ourselves here, is we do verify certificates of insurance for most of our clients.
Yeah.
Right. And really, again, it's hard to get people to add exclusions, but we're able to kind of identify by looking at who the carrier is, what line of business they're doing. We kind of know based on experience, right? Because we really insure the same companies, same type of companies. Is where can you identify, hey, this doesn't look right? I mean, and again, all this does not. I don't want to use this to kind of say there's a malintent to this process. It's just the process is so clunky, and there's human error involved. Most of the time, it's just the communication from the beginning of you buying a policy is not transparent enough.
Yeah,
and it kind of trickles a trickle-down effect.
Yeah, you get that landlord satisfying little general liability policy, bare bones, only covers your premises. And it just kind of renews every year. And maybe you were never even explicitly told that nothing else is covered on this policy. And 4 or 5 years down the line, you've just been renewing it and presenting certificates to everybody that asked for one.
Right.
And none of your work has been insured for years. I mean, I've seen it all the time too. I've seen it with contractors. I spoke to a contractor earlier last year, and he subs out all his work. He's been doing it for years. And subbed work was excluded on his policy. And he wasn't collecting insurance from his subcontractors. So nothing was covered.
Right.
So we had to rewrite everything. And it wasn't like he was trying to game the system, get away from it.
It just wasn't.
He just didn't know.
He didn't know.
So he was like, okay, let's correct it.
And I think because sometimes people don't know, and again, going back to the way our process works, there's so much human error involved, good and bad. You can't just trust certificates of insurance as you're covered.
Yeah.
You got to push on and ask more questions. And this is where the agent comes in too. This is part of the servicing. When you're asking for COIs, talk to your agent, send it to them. Sometimes it's not a perfect system. It doesn't exist in what we're talking about. But that second eye from trained professionals can identify maybe something's wrong. Yeah. Right? It's those little added value stuff. But a certificate of insurance does not necessarily mean you're accurately covered.
Exactly.